and welcome to Take Your Time, a Persona 5 Royal in Real-Time podcast. My name is Jonathan Dornbush. I'm your host for this week, joined by Tom Marks.
Hello.
I'm pivoting and not saying time too much this week to throw you off, to keep you all on your toes, because sometimes, you just got to roll with the punches as they come. Because also, we've got a lot of story to talk about this week. Of course, this is our show. We're running through all of Persona 5 Royal according to the in-game calendar and our real calendar. So if you haven't caught up, you're just jumping into this episode, you've got a pretty good, listening journey to go through before this. I'd recommend starting at the beginning, but what do I know? I'm just recording the show. I forget everything that happens immediately after. Tom, we have a lot to get to this week in the week of July 19th to July 25th. But before we do, let's do some housekeeping, including an answer to last week's pop quiz question.
Yes, so we did have some guesses for this. The question, to remind folk, was Yusuke and Ryuji are texting you after the summer festival. They're talking about what they're going to, different foods. Ryuji says, man, I could really go for some ramen. I'm going to go eat. And Yusuke says, yes, I'm also hungry, and says he's going to go eat something. And the question was, what does Yusuke say he's going to go eat? We had a few answers. On YouTube, Devin said crackers, Joey said breadcrumbs, and Maria Z said leftover bread, all kind of in the right area, right wheelhouse, but not quite right. Also, real quickly, Maria Z also said, P.S. Beaver is an actual bar / coffee / brunch place in Athens run by a queer cooperative, which is my favorite little fun fact of the week.
That's awesome. I love it.
Anyway, Yusuke says that he is going to go eat, in the continuation of one of my favorite running gags, which is that Yusuke is weirdly poor and concerned about food, some high-quality bread crusts. So technically leftover bread was true, but high-quality bread crusts is just one of my favorite things.
I'm walking around with hundreds of thousands of yen in my pocket. Like, we really need to be giving this dude a couple bucks to buy some food. I feel so not even just a piece of leftover bread or stale bread or day-old bread, but just bread crusts.
I just appreciate what this says about Yusuke's character is both that he's frugal and not very well off, but also a man of discerning taste.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
He might be eating bread crusts, but he knows the good bread crusts from the bad bread crusts.
Exactly. He goes to the finest bakeries in all of Yanganjaya, because there's none in there. But no, he'll find the best bakeries that he can and just ask, hey, do you have, your highest quality bread? I'll take the crusts, please. Does it keep costs down?
I don't know.
Anyway,
it's a good question.
It is a good question, but your question, your pop quiz question, was a great one, Tom, and thank you as always for providing these for the audience and myself. Before we jump into this week's events, which there are a lot of, we do have some viewer comments from last week's episode, which people left on the YouTube version of our show, which you can go check out by searching for Dornology on YouTube, because they still won't give me that URL. Gosh darn it. Anyway, Eric wrote in and commented and said, uh-oh, I'm all caught up on this podcast after finding it last week. That's the kind of binge listening I approve of. Now I'm going to have to actually wait for the next episode. Damn you guys being so entertaining. And Eric, thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you for discovering the show and listening to all of it in a week. And I'm sorry that you'll now have to go through the pain that we go through of only playing a week's worth at each week's pace. Because we love it all so much. But no, thank you so much for tuning in, and welcome to the Take Your Time podcast listening family. And we hope you enjoy future episodes. And Dexter, and I believe this is Dexter, the serial killer. Dexter, wrote in and said, hey, Tom, how'd you end up with 8 requests? The game was giving me a bunch a while ago, but I cleared those, and it seems like I didn't get almost any through the last Palace storyline.
So this is a combination of things. Yeah, you do just get a bunch naturally through certain story moments. You get some after completing the Palace that, Mishima will be like, oh, wait, there's this other thing that I didn't tell you about. Some of them you have to go hunting for, right? You have to go see it. You'll get a clue towards one, and then you got to go talk to a person or do a thing. And then also 2 of the ones that I did came from confidant lines, where you'll get a confidant, you'll get a quest, a momentous request depending at certain points in certain confidant lines. So one of mine was Chihaya and one of them was Kawakami. So those kind of all just stacked up. I think I also hadn't done some from the previous one, right? So it was really just like a lot of build up all at once. So that's kind of where all those came from.
I think I have like only 3 or 4 lingering, so yeah, I do definitely need to hunt some more down. But that's a problem for the next few weeks of free time that we're gonna have.
Yeah.
And Tom, do you want to address that now or maybe after the week?
We can talk about it later
at the end of the show. Cool.
Yeah. Make them look forward to something mysterious now.
Ooh, exciting. Well, there
that exciting.
There are quite a few mysteries of this week. Oh, it's exciting. Let me tell you, Tom, we gotta build it up. We gotta, create the mystery and the mystique. No, we have quite a bit to talk about this week, though, with the introduction of some new personas of people in real life, their aliases, and our next real palace excursion all starts this week. It's a really, really packed week, and so I figured let's really get into the nitty-gritty of exams. Our exam grades get posted at the beginning of this week. Let's start off on July 19th. I do want to, before we get into our scores, just a very funny thing that I noticed in, I guess, language advisory for the next 30 seconds. The July 19th fan site little thing in the bottom right corner, for me, said, shit plus shit equals shit sandwich as the comment. It's just like, that's your clever way of putting the Phantom Thieves down, my dude? I don't think so. And like
I think the localizers had fun with some of those.
I do too. No, they're really funny. I just want to know what goes in between the sandwich. You know, what's in the middle? What's the meat?
Yeah, that's not really a shit sandwich at that point yet.
Exactly. That's just the bread. What's the filling? Anyway, we get our scores back. As I hope all of you, placed in the top 10. If you nailed your scores. Is that how it happened for you, Tom?
Man.
No?
I was a little above the average because you were foreknowledge before the test.
Oh, so it does affect it. Okay.
Yeah, it does affect it. The higher your knowledge, the better you are.
I thought you just needed to clear the hurdle. I didn't realize.
No. So yeah, it's if you're at the point, the hurdle that you need to be, then you're above the average and you get 2 charm. But if you are more than that, I assume you got more than that.
I think I might have gotten 3, yeah.
Yeah. So, congratulations.
Well, look who's excited for this week then. Everything's turning up Dornbush. No, but anyway, we got our scores back. The gang gets together to talk about things. Naturally, Ryuji, it's not the best of times for him when it comes to score times. But we get a little conversation of Ryuji, Mishima, and you meeting to discuss Medjed after getting the scores back. There's just really no leads at this point.
Yeah.
The Phantom Thieves are sort of stalled out. We know this is obviously a big part of the section of the game because of the sci flash forward, but as of right now, trying to get any dirt on Medjed has just not been working. Ryuji, of course, is trying to blame all of this going on. The Medjed stuff, the emergency assembly that's going to take place on the 25th, all of that just is the reason he got bad grades. But
of course,
that's how life works. We get a little bit of a look at the hacker girl once again popping up, which we'll get more of as the week goes on. Being able to read your texts, things. She's getting deeper into your life and your history and everything. But of course, we also get a little bit of free time this day. And this is kind of the calm before the storm of story stuff, isn't it? Yeah, this is, and what's funny is this is a weird week where we'll get free restrained times through most of the week. Where we're stuck at LeBlanc, but today we get a bit of free time. So what did you do with your vestige of freedom?
So during the day I leveled Makoto, and then during the evening I leveled Kawakami. Okay. And this was, I will mention, a significant level because now I'm level 9 with her, which means I got to not date her because I am not a weirdo. No judging, but also a little judging in this exact instance. Yeah, so level 9 is, for those who don't know, when you get to make relationship decisions And like I didn't go near that one with a 10-foot pole. And we can talk about her kind of full storyline later on, but I am glad that I did get her to this point too, because it does a couple mechanical things. The like big payoff for her story, her confidant line, is rank 10, but it does let you call her without having to pay every time now at rank 9, which is a super nice kind of hidden benefit of getting her to that spot.
Yeah, that's definitely a good addition. I'm not quite there with her, but I did call her once or twice this week just because we're in LeBlanc for most of it, so I figured might as well maximize. Yeah. But I hung out with Makoto and then hung out with Mishima because I realized I was letting him lag, and this got me to the point where back characters, like characters not in your party, are also gaining the extra XP. So good. I just wanted to make sure everyone was at that level. But also during this time, we do get a little funny moment where Yusuke gets a lead. He's like, I know some more about Medjed, and then just gives you a history lesson on the name of Medjed, which I very much appreciated, as another inflection of what Yusuke can be for the group. It's very funny. And
it also does relate to stuff later on, as you find out, right?
Yes.
That Medjed is this character that is from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and is like an unseen like god that rains fury or whatever, and that's basically what a international hacker group does as well. So it's some cool little thematic stuff there.
Absolutely, yeah. And then we get a little bit of a Velvet Room excursion that evening, where we're brought in to talk a little bit about Medjed. I always love these because Igor is always talking from this place of knowing how just awful or great things could be, and you're just like, what is this? What's that about? What's this? Like, you're always just like, what the hell, man?
These in between palace kind of setup conversations always feel like, don't forget I exist to me. Like, yeah. It really sometimes does just feel like, hey, you remember this guy? He's important to the story.
Yeah, because you can really go a long time without. Like, if you don't worry about Persona fusions and things like that, not that you shouldn't, but you can kind of get by without doing too much. You can really forget the Velvet Room exists.
Yeah, and even when you are doing that stuff consistently, it can just be this mechanical sort of output for you. It doesn't have to be it doesn't scream story stuff unless you're doing the Caroline Justine stuff as well.
Yeah, and that's also then more focused on them. Like, you're often in that room talking to them. So yeah, you're totally right. They are very much like a, hey, I still exist, which I love in the context of everything, but anyway.
And honestly, frankly, it's not a terrible thing to have for 140-hour JRPG, right?
Agreed.
It's like it reminds me, things like that remind me of like, this is a total tangent and I apologize, but like Shakespearean plays, where like in Shakespearean plays you like have characters repeating the same information over and over and over again, like multiple times, just reiterating the same stuff that you've already heard or reiterating plot points that have already happened. And it's because back in the day when they wrote these plays, the theaters were open forums that you could just walk into at any point in the play. It wasn't like you got there on time. So they needed to like reiterate things so that no matter where you came in, you would be caught up and you would understand what's going on. And it feels like that for me sometimes in long JRPGs like this, where they're like reiterating a lot of stuff, and like if you're caught up and paying attention, it doesn't really matter. But if you like have put the game down for a month and came back and you're like, oh wait, that happened 50 hours ago and I have no idea what they're talking about, then like these little check-ins are useful, right?
Totally.
To that end.
It's funny you went to Shakespeare because my mind went to modern television, because when TV based around act breaks, when that was the priority, you'd often get act breaks and then you come back into the act break and they're like, let me tell you a little bit about what just happened, even though you were just watching it in case people tuned in, or, episode to episode, things at the start of an episode kind of recap what happened before it. Sure. Yeah, it's just a natural thing. And as you said, like for a game that is this massive and also this sprawling, where there's so many different things to really keep a focus on, it's good to have these check-ins.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on just to get a little bit into the week, since we're going to have a lot toward the end. July 20th, we get a little bit of a meeting with Akechi at the train discussing Medjed. Just one of those, again, check-ins, reminders of his interests and everything. We are getting messages from someone named Alibaba starting today, who wants us to change someone's heart, and they'll give us info on Medjed, but we can't reply back to them. After all their messages come in, we just get an error when we try to reply. So we decide to head somewhere quieter to discuss things, so we go to LeBlanc, because
Wait, real quick, I know we gotta speed through this part, but this is also one of my favorite moments, this conversation where they're talking about the texts you get, because every one of the party is like such an old person and doesn't understand how texting works, or like there's this line where Yusuke goes like, is this what some people would refer to as hacking? And then they're all like, oh, maybe it is. It's like, come on, guys.
They don't get the 30 spam calls I get a day telling me my car warranty is in danger, apparently.
Yeah.
I don't have a car. Joke's on you guys. Anyway, we head to the cafe. A thing that I think is worth pointing out here is that Sojiro vaguely notices Makoto's name when you speak. But anyway, the gang goes to discuss Alibaba, and we specifically are going to LeBlanc to, maybe have a little bit of a quieter place to discuss things than out in the open at a train station.
Novel concept.
Yeah. Anyway, we get, while they're discussing, Medjed essentially declares victory. They put out a statement putting down the Phantom Thieves, saying they are not just by the lack of there not being a public comment against them, proving them right. And Medjed goes so far as to say they will go after any followers of the Phantom Thieves. And essentially... they're trying to strike out and root out any possible fandom and favoritism toward the Phantom Thieves.
And over today and the day before, you kind of get a sense of that the Medjed, right, is basically positioned as sort of like a digital version of the Phantom Thieves, right, in their ideals. They're this like digital Robin Hood, sort of refer to themselves as, taking down evil corporations for the good of all sort of thing, is like, it's interesting how they're positioned as a parallel to the Phantom Thieves.
Agreed. I also realized my light in the background was on my Beyond color, so I changed it to red for Persona. Anyway, to complicate matters on this evening as well, we get a letter in the mail, a calling card, if you will. And we pretty much just have to wait for instructions at this point. Like we're in a holding pattern.
Yeah.
It's an interesting. Go ahead.
Well, this is Alibaba, right? Said that
they
sent the necessary tool, and you didn't know what that meant, and then you got a calling card, and it was like, you're right. It's a very much like a what's going on right now. We got to just wait and see sort of moment.
I like it because after 3 relatively not easy but methodical and wins that worked out well for us kind of at every step, other than like the waiting for word from a journalist to give us some information. We pretty much have been winning at every step of the way almost,
right.
And so this is kind of like putting us on the back foot, like what is going on. We're so far in the dark on things, and I like that. Anyway, we do also have a free evening, so what did you do in the cafe?
So this is one of like 4 in a row free LeBlanc only evenings. And I feel like I didn't do great these evenings.
Me neither. Yeah.
I don't know, but I did have a DVD to watch. So the first day I finished a Guts book, because I'm still trying to get Guts and Charm up. So the first day I finished reading a book about Guts and got to level 4 on Guts.
Nice.
So now I can finally ask EY what's in the bag.
Cool. What? Okay, this is going to be a real dumb question. And I'm sorry I'm asking this.
It's a gun in the bag.
Do you just have to study to read any book you want in the cafe? I never study in the cafe, so I don't know how you get to read whatever book you want in the cafe.
Oh, no. So there's the like booth where you study, but if you go to the chair right next to the phone where you call Kawakami, you can read books. Did you not know that?
I wasted so much time. I've been holding the speed reading book all of this goddamn week because I was like, I don't have a chance to read it. This is, I'm just like, I need a train so I can read this.
If it helps.
Yeah.
I hate reading at LeBlanc because you get opportunities to read elsewhere. So for free, right?
Yeah.
Either in class or on the train. So I actually really dislike having to spend reading time reading in LeBlanc anyway.
Gotcha.
And do it very infrequently because it feels like you are spending a unit of time on something that you could be getting for free if you just waited.
Gotcha.
The only reason I was doing it now is because I specifically wanted Guts and Charm, and the only ways I had to do that in LeBlanc were books. So I read to do that. But yeah.
I did not know that existed. Jonathan learns
fair,
a new thing about the game he loves.
It's a nondescript chair, and if you're like 10 pixels to the right, you're making a phone call, and if you're 10 pixels to the left, you're making coffee. So, like, I don't blame you.
10 Pixels to the Left, a memoir by Jonathan Dornbush. Anyway, so I cleaned the cafe while Kawakami made coffee. Neither of which led to any big wins, but it was a little bit of, I think, kindness and a little bit of coffee. So I'll take it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had Kawakami making either coffee or curry all week.
Yeah.
All 4 of these evenings as well.
Yeah. Anyway, after that, we move on to July 21st. We have a run-in with Kasumi at the train station. I didn't write anything down from that conversation.
It was pretty uneventful.
Yeah. We get a little fake out where we think Alibaba is going to be texting us. It's Ryuji. We get really upset because we talk to Ryuji all the time. But then we finally do get Alibaba texting us again and tells us the name of the target for who they want changed. And it is Futaba Sakura.
Yeah, it's clear that Alibaba throughout this doesn't really understand, like, is smart enough to find you and know you're the Phantom Thieves, but doesn't actually understand what you're doing or how the process works, right?
Yes, yeah.
So you're like, I have to have a name, and so they give you the name Futaba.
They're operating on incomplete information for sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, we get this name, which, probably should have some awareness to you because it is, of course, Sojiro's name. And we just kind of go up to Sojiro and ask to meet Futaba.
Hey, but a nice little parallel here too is that Sojiro recognizes Makoto's last name, and then Makoto recognizes Sojiro's last name.
You're right.
It's almost like they're all connected.
But weirdly, they're not. It's all random chance, and nothing at all is related in this game. Anyway, we just kind of go up to Sojiro and ask to meet Futaba. Naturally, he gets very angry at us and leaves the cafe. Yeah. So we don't get any information out of him.
The only thing he really lets slip is that he does know the name.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, he says, who told you that name or whatever. And so there's an indication that you're on the right track, but not the right method, I guess.
It's a week of, like, breadcrumbs. Or, if I may, high-quality bread crusts. Anyway, so as you said, we get the understanding that he knows the name, but not much else other than that. We do, of course, get another free evening. What did you do this eve?
This evening, I watched a DVD for Proficiency, just because it was the only DVD I had, and I think it's the only DVD I haven't finished watching that's available right now. It's a movie called Jailbreak, or a show called Jailbreak.
Nice. Okay.
It's potentially a little culturally insensitive, but that's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but it's a little weird.
Yeah, I don't think I've watched that one yet. I did watch a DVD later this week, but I believe it was the ER ripoff.
Gotcha.
Anyway, this evening, I just made coffee. I forgot to call Kawakami that evening, so I just made coffee. So I got a little bit extra, but, whatever. Moving on from there to continue through the week as these bread crusts continue to lead us along. Ryuji suggests that we ask around Yongen-Jaya to get some information about Futaba. Obviously, that's where Sojiro lives, so it makes sense. You can go around, you get little bits of conversations here and there. This is something, the game has done a couple times by this point. Really, the only piece of information we get, I thought, of any interest, is that Sojiro buys a lot of food.
Yeah.
More than enough food for one person.
Yeah.
hopefully some good bread crusts. You go around, you get these little scraps of info, but it doesn't really lead you to any specific knowledge of who Futaba is. But we do then return back to the cafe, and Sai is there talking to Sojiro, and this is the most heated conversation yet, and also most descriptive conversation, because she's talking about taking Sojiro's custody away due to allegations of abuse if he doesn't talk to her.
Right. Yeah, this is one of those conversations that by the end of the week you have a lot more kind of comprehension of what it all means, right? But at this point it's a lot of like sort of in passing mentions of things, like Sojiro throws out the name Wakaba at one point, and Sai mentioned something about like wanting to find out if there's a link between cognitive science and the psychotic breakdowns that are happening, right? So it's like a lot of big words being thrown around that you might not have. You kind of recognize the pieces, but you don't really know how they fit into the puzzle yet.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is very heated and ends up being Sojiro kind of giving in to her eventually.
Yeah, and he certainly seems shocked at the idea of these abuse allegations, and I do think it's worth mentioning his shock, but also, yeah, as you were saying, this balance of we're getting a lot of terms and things thrown around, and if this were a show that was day to day, we'd perhaps linger on what the mysteries of those could be. Right. But we get some answers, as you said, later in the week. So again, this is the big point for the week in terms of we are getting a little bit more information about who Futaba might be, their relation to Sojiro, and how all of this connects. But before we get any further than that, we have another free evening. So what did you do?
I finished that movie, and I got leveled up, so I'm level 4 proficiency now.
Nice, congrats. I think I'm lingering on level 3 there, or did I get level 4? I can't remember. But I started the ER parody this evening.
Gotcha.
And as someone who weirdly is a big TV person but never saw an episode of ER, I feel like I'm probably missing some in-jokes. But, you know, I get it. I've seen bits of Grey's Anatomy. I can assume.
I hope that really makes the ER like fan base mad. I hope that we have some. If you're a big ER stan and you are going, how dare you compare it to Grey's Anatomy? Please let me know.
I mean, isn't Grey's Anatomy just supposed to be a more heightened ER?
I've never watched either of them. I was a House guy. And Scrubs. Those were my medical shows.
Yeah, House. I watched so much House. That was a big one. Yeah.
What are we talking about?
Welcome to Housecast. We're going to be talking about every episode of House.
And we've got a ton to talk about today. Wait, real quick, let's discuss the differences between ER and Grey's Anatomy and House.
Listen, we're going to just get into all those shenanigans and whether or not he really, really has emotions at the end of the day. What was the disease it always never was?
Lupus. Lupus. It's not lupus. Yeah.
Until it was. Anyway, moving on to July 23rd.
There was some forming ethereal image of an Arsène Lupus joke that I just couldn't get to, but I needed to say it out loud.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Okay.
I can only, whenever I think about House, it's just him angrily saying Cuddy's name. That's just like the first thing that comes to mind.
Where have we gone?
I don't know.
What is going on?
I was going to keep going, but someone's going to get very angry. July 23rd, the continuing mysteries of this week, begin to spiral. The gang meets at the hideout. But we've got more important things to discuss than hideout frustrations. We get questions about whether Sojiro is actually abusive, and that's sort of a lingering thing for the group. Like, do we know enough about Sojiro to really question whether or not this could be a facet of who he is?
I think that's the big takeaway here, and the reason they do this kind of like questioning if the abuse is real at all sort of vibe is like, you don't really, I think it's meant to show you that you actually don't really know a lot about the guy that is taking you in yet. Like, even in the like confidant ranks where you can get him up to rank 4, those are basically all to show he's got something shady going on in his past, and he's just teaching you how to do cafe stuff. None of it is really personal yet. Not much. And so, yeah, I think it's basically just to, like, make that clear to you. Because obviously, it doesn't, the tension doesn't last for very long. It's just to make you go, like, oh, yeah, we don't really know his story at all.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of, as you said, the confidant beats really do give the idea of there are more layers to his life that we just don't know about, and we don't know if they are good or bad or his fault or external forces and whatnot.
Right.
So anyway, at the same time, we're concerned about the truth of who Sojiro is. Alibaba is also texting us and pressuring of like, why the hell have we not finished this already? Why have we not changed their heart? And don't they know we're at least supposed to be given it 2 to 3 weeks of free time to figure this out? Come on. Anyway, they're really, really upset about this, realizing we need to steal directly, that there needs to be a little bit more of a direct connection to the person that we're stealing from. And upon learning this, they decide, oh, we'll just call it off then. Forget it.
Yeah.
Which isn't great. It leaves us in a weird place, but maybe things are fine then. Maybe we don't have to worry about Alibaba trying to blackmail us. Maybe we can just go about Medjed stuff on our own. And of course, naturally, that means everything turns to thinking about food and celebrating.
Well, yeah, and Ryuji, like, also brings up this point, right, about, like, well, Medjed said they declared victory, and then they just didn't do anything. And it's been a couple days since they said anything. And now Alibaba is like, I'm not going to report you for being the Phantom Thieves, and you don't have to change my heart, and everything's done. So, like, Ryuji's kind of the one to point out, like, hey, everything's just, like, over.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, there's this mystery here, but maybe we just don't worry about it, and we go get sushi instead?
Maybe we just be kids for a little bit, which,
Yeah.
I think it tracks. And yeah, that's the end of the game. They all celebrate, and then it's over. No, we do talk about sort of plans for getting sushi. We do, I think it's Ryuji who mentions the reward from Kanashiro's palace was like 150,000 yen's worth, so we've got plenty to celebrate. Don't have to rely just on bread crusts for a day.
At 150,000 yen, or as I like to call it, like an hour in mementos.
Yeah, that's fair. It is funny when you realize how much you can manipulate the economy of the game, how much they get excited for relatively now small amounts of money.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's their plans going forward. It seems like, hey, we're just going to chill and have some good times. And of course, we do also get a free LeBlanc evening again. So what did you do here?
Here I read the Charm book, and this was the first time that I'd actually taken advantage of the speed reader book, having already read that, and so I finished a 2-part book in one sitting, and I love being able to do that.
It is a really nice perk that I should do at some point once I learn where you can read books. I finished the ER DVD, and I think the thing about House that I really want to make is that Olivia Wilde really got her start on House in a way that other shows
Not a joke
didn't
anymore.
quite.
It's become real.
It was that and The OC were really the 1-2 punch of Fox shows where Olivia Wilde got to show her acting ability.
I'm glad that you didn't waste time saying time 12 times at the beginning of the show so that we had time to talk about House.
Yep. Really, House and Persona 5 are essentially the same piece of media. In this essay, I will prove my theory. Moving on from there, we get to July 24th, where we're really starting to get into the meat of things. Because as you might see, we're pretty close to the end of the week, but I think there was a lot to talk about in these last couple days.
Yeah,
so,
the last couple days are stacked.
Yeah, so let's really, I think, start to dig in here. July 24th, we start off with an Akechi and Sai conversation that sort of, I think, really crystallizes them as antagonists for you at this point. She essentially instructs Akechi to take down the Phantom Thieves because she's frustrated that they're not making enough progress as they need to. The Phantom Thieves are like getting one over on the police, like they're doing their job for them. She's very unhappy with it and tells Akechi to just go do this. He's gleefully excited to have the chance. And she's also, trying to figure out the heart of things. Akechi starts to make the connection that these heart stealings could be a cover for the mental shutdowns. This could be just a ruse to get over the terrible continuous shutdowns that we've been seeing. And it's the way that Akechi always talks around things, where he's like, well, I don't know if I have enough proof for this, but here's where I think things are happening. Which is always a fun sort of conversation to have. But yeah, it sets the stage for them being a little bit more antagonistic with you. Meanwhile,
well, real
yes,
quick,
yeah.
if I may, the other thing that drives me, that is like a really quick aside in this conversation that is like, I think kind of infuriating to a certain extent, is that earlier in the week when Sai is interrogating Sojiro and being like threatening him with taking away custody and all of this stuff, he's like, nothing I tell you is gonna matter. I can't believe you're going to these lengths. I'm being honest when I say none of it matters. And Sai is basically like, we'll be the ones to judge that. And then a couple days later in this conversation, Akechi's like, what did you get out of that cafe owner? And he's just like, nothing. And it's like, so he was right. Nothing. He's like, she was being crazy aggressive and he was just being honest with her. Like, yeah. He was just being like, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to be able to help you. And then later we get confirmation that he didn't. And she was like, it was a dead end for her. And it's like, oh, great. So that didn't matter.
I mean, it's, I think it ties into them showing the ways that like, certain power and certain institutions can kind of just run rampant with that power, regardless of the information they have. And that was the thing about this conversation that really crystallized for me, at least, this idea that there's a lot of back and forth, and forgive me, I forgot to write down the exact conversation dialogue, but there's a little bit of back and forth of like, you can't make those leaps in logic, but then they make those leaps in logic because one of them says it just the right way. Like Akechi just phrases it in a way that makes it seem plausible, and they want to run with it. It very much shows how like even the smallest of manipulations can really lead to big changes and have a big impact. Anyway, from there, the gang goes to get sushi. They're all having a wonderful time. Digging in, except for Yusuke, who, doesn't know what to do with all of this delicious food.
And Morgana in a bag. So sad.
You can't have a cat at a sushi restaurant.
Well, they're bad friends is all I'm saying.
They should have...
Give Morgana fatty tuna.
They should have ordered it to go. They're having this wonderful meal and celebrating being Phantom Thieves very loudly for Ryuji. And then they have to cover it up because you shouldn't say you're the Phantom Thieves in public.
He literally yells, "It's all thanks to us being the Phantom Thieves." It's like, I mean, like, it is hilarious even for him how direct it is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's... But, he is a good boy, and he's just trying to do his best.
I'll forgive him forever.
I will
till the ends of the earth.
We also in this conversation we get a little bit more of them wanting to question about Sojiro. This is just sort of the recurring theme before we get a little bit more information about things of, is he really secretly an abuser that we don't know about? What's really going on in his life? We have these very few scant details about who Futaba might be. What is going on? But before we get there, we get into a run-in with Akechi. I forgot his name, even though I was staring right at it. Akechi runs into them at the train station, and as you've written down in our run of show, I think it sums up many of Akechi's appearances. Seems friendly, but is suspicious. Because during this conversation, we learn that Medjed has declared war on the Phantom Thieves. He's this whole time talking about, I love it because he's like, interesting, the group of you is such an odd group to have. And it's almost like you all have connections to the few Phantom Thieves changes of hearts that have happened publicly. And it's odd that all of you would be hanging out together. And you just have to be like, I don't know, man. What do you want?
Yeah.
It's like, he could not more obviously be like, so you're the Phantom Thieves.
Yeah, but then Ryuji is like, "Are you going to arrest us?" And he's like, "Oh, I wasn't implying anything."
Yeah.
Why do you say that? And it's like, come on, man.
Just say it. Quick rewind. Just another tangent I have to go back to. At the sushi place, it's not about House, but it is about another TV show. They're like, don't worry about it. The fish is market price. And whenever anyone says market price, the only thing I can think of is that Community tag where they're having dinner at a fancy restaurant, and they look at the price of the check, and they're like, what price was it? Market price. And Troy, Donald Glover, is like, what market are you shopping at? And that's just always, anytime anyone says something is market price, that's where my head goes.
In that scene, I think.
Yeah, I believe you're correct.
Yeah, this Akechi scene though is very like, it's like confrontational and not confrontational at the same time, right? It is very much Akechi not trying to blow up their spot, but also like pretty clearly indicating that he knows what's going on, at least to you, the player, if not them, the Phantom Thieves.
Yeah, because he's able to pick out who Yusuke is. Like, he knows him just by interacting with him, or just by seeing him, which surprises everyone. And they, it's I think you nailed it. It is very interesting for the player and maybe not as telegraphed for them, the group. But we get this conversation. We learn that Medjed is declaring war. They say they will attack Japan unless the Phantom Thieves reveal themselves. And so suddenly things are going a little bit... the S has hit the fan, even though we said the word earlier. As you had pointed out, thank you for getting the specifics. They'll devastate the Japanese economy on August 21st if their real identities aren't revealed by then. So finally, we have a little bit of a deadline to work with now, which is always good. We always need dates to be our North Star. Anyway, we get through this conversation and we go back to Boss's house to check. But I believe at this point, Makoto has sort of realized that Alibaba and Futaba are sort of the same.
Yeah. She pieces together that like they can't. One of them wants to interact and can't leave, and like, but then they can see each other, and they basically she's just like, oh yeah, they're probably the same person.
Yeah, which again perfectly ties into, of course, Makoto would be the one to figure that logic path out. And so they realize they need some answers. They realize there is now a bit of pressure on them after their sushi celebration to actually get things done. And they decide to go to Sojiro's house, which probably you have stopped by once or twice in your time. But we go over to Sojiro's house. I love that you have just written down, hilarity ensues.
I mean, is there a more succinct way to explain it?
No, that is probably the most succinct way. It is very like... It's almost like Scooby-Doo meets sitcom pratfalls. It's just this wonderful combination of them deciding to go to his house to check. No one's answering the door, but the bell, but the door is slightly ajar. The gate is open. It's about to rain, so naturally we should just go run in.
It's about to rain is my favorite part because it doesn't actually rain. It's just so that they can have spooky thunder during the scary scene. It is like only for that. This scene is one of my favorite in the game because it is such a cartoon show of a scene. It is absolutely Scooby-Doo-ish or like an anime. It is just like, it's so over the top and goofy and wonderful.
It almost shocks me that they didn't animate it. Excuse me, in the like animation version, just because it is such like a singular moment. But we do have this moment, as you're saying, the thunderstorms start to happen, the lights go off, everyone's getting freaked out of like what's going on here. And then almost in a like most Scooby-Doo-esque moment, is it Makoto and Joker who are really close? And then we see a figure with very big glasses, but we can't see their eyes, sort of pop up behind them as a ghostly specter, and freak the group out. Makoto is the most scared, I would say, during all of this, and starts actually like panic shouting for Sai. Starts essentially like a chant asking for her sister's help.
She like drops on her knees and is like hugging Joker's leg, like in fear.
Over and over, and the gang starts to run, and also at this point, Sojiro is coming home to make things worse. So most of the gang disappears, and then it's kind of Joker and Makoto just left there. And I love that his first reaction is like, "You two dating? Is this what's going on here?"
Yeah.
And you have to be like, "No, we're just friends."
That's like always the misconception that they're worried about in this game is like if a boy and a girl are hanging out together, that like, oh, you must be dating is like always the top concern, not like why are you in my home? But like, oh, you two are together, aren't you? And it's like, wait, that's what you're worried about now?
It like, again, this is a probably a naive question, but I do wonder if that is a cultural thing.
It could be.
Yeah, I don't know how much, but yeah, it is funny that is sort of like the first parameter of questioning, and not what are you doing in my house? No, really, what are you doing in my house? So anyway, this happens. The rest of the gang reveals themselves as well to be in the house, which is I as you said, I love this moment. It is one of, I think, the funniest, best like group scenes. It also, there's a moment where you see everyone walking together, and this is a thing that hit me on my first playthrough, but I do want to bring up. It's just like the scope of the cast that you get to know is so big. Like it is, and they're together. Like they are persistent and growing, and it's this really great evolution of a friend group, because it is, it started off you and Ryuji and Morgana, and then it slowly adds these people. And as everyone walked into this cramped small hallway, I'm like, oh yeah, they're a big group.
Yeah.
I'm happy. I'm happy we have friends. Yeah. Anyway, finally, we get to have a discussion about Futaba, and Sojiro tells them the majority of what they need to know back at the cafe. Telling them... Go ahead.
Well, yeah, digs into the details of, like, Futaba's mom, right, being this, like... his friend, right, who was very plucky, and then having her and being a very good mom, and then one day jumping into traffic in front of her for seemingly no reason, and this very sad tale, and how he took her in, and she's now having, like, doesn't want to leave, and is very closed off, and is, like, hearing things, even, like, auditory hallucinations, and it's a sad story, right? It's a shame, because you are set up to think that maybe he is being abusive, and then you're finding out that he's actually, like, incredibly caring.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And, as you said, we learn all of this about Futaba, her backstory. Sojiro, of course, Sojiro is not her biological father, but he cares so much for her and for her mother, who I like his initial description is like, she was a weird one, but,
right.
Eventually he fell in love with her. And we get this, I think a really more full picture of not just Sojiro, but Futaba, and the gang they're now genuinely feeling for Futaba and wanting to go apologize for, intruding, obviously also to get information, but genuinely, I do think there's a bit of a concern and wanting to apologize. He mentions, she's not sick in a contagious way or anything, but it wouldn't be the best to try to intrude because she's holed up there. But I'm trying to think of how I wanted to phrase it, but basically this is obviously not the end of where things go for the rest of the next couple of days. Is there anything else from that Sojiro conversation though that you want to mention before we move on? I'm just trying to remember.
No, it's just very it's very touching, right? Like it is a good moment, I think.
Yeah.
In the scheme of things.
And we do know that after this conversation, they check the nav, and they're able to confirm that Futaba does have a palace, which I forgot to mention, but they do check the nav for Sojiro, and he does not have a palace.
Right.
They check that at the sushi restaurant. But Futaba does, and this brings up the interesting question of, well, she doesn't seem evil. This isn't a palace born of someone being this evil monster, and it raises a lot of questions more about palace construction and things of that nature. Luckily, we're able to get a little bit more information because, of course, Futaba was listening in, but Morgana was hiding in her room during this whole group shenanigan thing of them creeping around the house. Morgana didn't come back directly with, but does come back later. I enjoyed this moment. I believe it's after the flash forward, but just to mention, it's like Morgana's like, you just left me? Were you not worried about me coming back? Like, what the hell, you guys?
Yeah.
But we do get another flash forward with Sai, who gets a confidant rank up and says perhaps it was fate that you had a hideout at the home of is it Wakaba
Ishiki?
Thank you. At her daughter's, essentially place of residence, like a proxy too.
Right.
And so we get a little bit there, fleshing out that her family history is more important than just who she was to Futaba and Sojiro.
And also, a key point about this flash forward, because we do get another rank up, and Sai's starting to believe you now more, but it's also starting to believe you more because you're starting to tell her things that she already knows are true.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're starting to give her details that, you shouldn't know that you do. And that's, I think, this important moment in terms of Sai being like, oh, okay, maybe that means you're not lying, right? Because if your story is lining up with what I know, then that means that this is like has a grain of truth to it.
Yeah, that's a really good call to point that out, because obviously these flash forwards will continue for a bit.
Right.
But moving on from there,
I guess real quick, the only last thing I forgot to mention is this idea that Futaba, like Sojiro says, Futaba blames herself for her mother's death, right?
Yeah.
Even though it was a suicide, she blames herself for that. She thinks she did it to some degree.
Yeah, which I think is an important beat for the palace construction and kind of how that can happen.
It's also really tragic. It's like really heartbreaking.
Yeah. And this is before we've, really we've said a word or two to Alibaba, but we really don't know Futaba just yet.
Yeah.
Moving on to July 25th, the final day of this week, we get our school assembly, the really important school assembly that we've been told was really important and that everyone had to go to school for, and that we were really waiting and anticipating all this time. Tom, why don't you tell us what happened at the assembly?
Sure. So moving on.
Yes, moving on from there, the gang meets up. And
they spend so much time setting this thing up, and then it literally isn't even shown on camera.
Yeah. It's really
amazing.
Funny.
It's weird as heck.
It's very strange. I really, really want to know if there was ever going to be an assembly there in that moment that we saw, because it is so built up as an important thing to remind you. But it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Anyway, the gang meets up after this school assembly thing. They're back home with the meeting. The big things here, of course, are Morgana ranks up. Yusuke is wearing the same clothes, and everyone's wondering what's going on there. Maybe we need to get this boy more clothing. If only there was somewhere we were able to buy equipment for people. Anyway, we decide to go to Sojiro's house from there to try to figure out Futaba's keyword.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting one because we're trying a few things. We don't really have much to go off of at this point.
Right.
It's really guesswork. And the best way... Go ahead.
And it's guesswork to an extent that is like beyond the guesswork of Kaneshiro or Madarame, because we don't even really know anything about Futaba.
Yes, yeah. We knew those guys we've had run-ins with them. We spoke to them. We know what their one thing is. If you had to paint them into a corner, no Madarame pun intended, you would know what they're about. But Futaba, other than this tragic backstory, we don't have much, so we go to try to talk to Futaba about it. But Futaba doesn't answer. Alibaba answers. Essentially, Makoto tries talking to Futaba through the door. Alibaba texts back and is angry that they're there. Makoto sort of realizes Joker speaking with Alibaba may be the best way to get some answers. And so Alibaba is texting you things about how they view their current predicament and their issues. And Futaba / Alibaba essentially reveals that she feels like this is where she'll die. This is sort of her tomb, is how she puts it. And tomb lets us activate the nav and gets us into the metaverse from here. Is there anything from the clues that lead that I'm forgetting that's really important to mention here?
No, but I did just make a connection that is completely unrelated.
Is it about House?
No, no. It's related to Persona. I just realized that at one point earlier, Sojiro gets a call about getting a printer, right? And that was for Futaba, and she needed the printer to print the calling card.
Oh, yeah.
I never really thought about that.
Oh, wow, yeah, I didn't
until this very moment.
Look at you, Persona 5 developers. Congratulations. I never thought of that either. Yeah, that's that's cool. I'm sure someone in the comments would have pointed that out to us. I'm like, how did you not realize that? But yeah. Very, very good connection there. Anyway, we are able to activate the nav, and we end up in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
We are just stuck really far out there. Our clothes don't immediately change, which pops up a couple times. We're still in our human clothes, which means we're not perceived as a threat just yet. But there's something off in the distance that we can get to, but it's a bit of a far ways to go. So why don't we drive? And we get an animated scene with Morgana as the cat bus driving on the way there. Of course, we get the really gross moment of all the dudes trying to check out On.
I think it's interesting, and maybe interesting is the wrong word for it. I think it's weird that the last two animated cutscenes have both involved the boys ogling On.
Yeah.
Like, in fact, that's been, like, the majority of the scene has just been them ogling On. Like,
yeah.
I don't know why they needed to do that twice in a row.
Yeah. My note was the boys are horny and gross.
Yeah, basically.
Like, yeah, I don't know. And forgive me, this is obviously something I'm not trying to spoil anything, but I genuinely don't remember too much of if the game really commentates on this in a long running scheme. There is a point after, like, quickly after the scene where On is just like, what the hell is wrong with you guys? Like, don't do, like, that was gross of you to do, but it doesn't go to the extent of, like, acknowledging this is a recurring problem in any sort of way.
Yeah, I think they're trying to just play it off as high school boys being gross, and, like, I think that's part of the point, but also it is, like, it's reiterated so often that it's a little weird how often they bring it up. Yeah, I guess is the only thing I'd say.
It feels like it crosses the line from just being high school boys to, like, they also kind of approve of it to a certain extent.
Sure.
But yeah, anyway, this happens.
Well, what I was going to also say just generally about this is I really dig, this is some of my favorite imagery in any palace.
Yeah.
Kind of how it's constructed is the idea that, like, in Futaba's mind, even though they went into the palace right in front of the door to her room, in her mind, her room is so isolated from the rest of the world that even the step from outside the door to in the door is, like, the size of a desert away in her mind. That is, I think, such a cool... That's such a weird, cool reference or, like imagery to me. It's always been something I really enjoyed about this palace, is that distance in her brain.
Yeah, and I think it's a nice, again, spin on the things of... Kamoshida's palace was the school. Obviously, Madarame's was his humble abode, his shack. Kanashiro's was this floating bank across all of Japan, and then we see, or at least of the city. And then hers is, as you're saying, really centered around this room, but what that room means to her is presented in such a fascinating way. Yeah, I think this is one of the more interesting, like, not just geographic, but, like, corollary between your mental and physical states palaces. Sure. Anyway, the team makes the drive there. We finally get there, and we're still in our regular clothes. We get into the pyramid that we arrive at, and we're running up a ton of stairs after a couple jumps, and it's like, this is really easy. Oh, this is nice. I wish all palaces were like this. This is so fun. What could go wrong? Ha 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 ha. And then we finally get to a point where we meet Shadow Futaba.
Yeah. And I also really like this structure of this palace too, in that idea that, like, well, she invited you in.
Yeah.
So you're not under any threat right away. And then it lets you literally walk through basically the entire palace so that you then, before it, spoilers, kicks you out, so that you get a sense of the palace all the way through before you then have to, like, actually do it. It's just a cool little way to shake up a normal palace structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get this interaction between Shadow Futaba and the gang that essentially causes us to become seen as threats.
Right.
Where Shadow Futaba is talking about how she wants to be here because her mother exists here at this palace. We won't be able to steal her treasure. Sort of as this is going on, concurrently, we do get a analog in the real world of the real world Futaba seeming to go into a trance and talking a little bit like Shadow Futaba, but importantly does shake herself out of it. And this is probably the most we've seen like things in the palace kind of relating to the person in real life.
Yeah. She hears the same voices that you hear in the palace.
Exactly. Which gives us a greater connection between the two spaces. But anyway, we've become a threat now, and we are, as you said, forced out of the palace essentially by a giant Indiana Jones style ball plunging down the steps that we have to outrun and causing us to kind of get knocked out of the palace. And at this point, we're like, let's just retreat. Let's take a breather. Let's figure out how we're going to approach this, because now this is a full-on palace adventure. We know we have the Medjed attack for August 21st on the horizon, so we need to be done at least a couple days ahead of time. So August 19th is sort of our deadline for completing the palace. And we should probably have a safer hideout. So LeBlanc is officially our new hideout. Thank God.
Yeah, it took a long time, but we're finally here.
Yeah. And then another sort of coda for this day before we finish the week. Real Futaba sees her mom as sort of a shadow entity, a shadow presence behind her.
Right.
And go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, please.
I was going to say, and just to further cement her within the group, we have her as Alibaba join the group chat. And she proves her worth by taking down the servers for the fan site for a moment to show that she can do the technical stuff they'll need to work with Medjed.
Yeah. And there's a couple things here that during this day kind of spread throughout it that I think are interesting to note too, is like Morgana mentions that if her cognition is warped, that could be like distorting her memories too, right? Like if her distortion in her brain is like, if she could genuinely think she killed her mom, right? She could genuinely be misremembering certain things because of her like warped distortion or cognitive state. And then on top of that, also, I think another interesting moment that is worth calling out is when she does have this sort of like visual hallucination of her mom. She repeats the same thing that she had texted of being like, I'll die here in my room. And then she kind of does sort of snap herself out of it a little bit and be like, no, wait, someone help me. And like, I think that's important to pointing out that like she understands that something is not quite right, that she can't solve herself and she needs the help of others to find, which I think is a really like interesting and powerful moment, because that's such an incredibly hard thing to do, especially when you're in like a really like dark place mentally, to be able to recognize like I need someone else's help to pull me out of this is like a very deep, valuable thing. And it just shows something about her character and kind of the place she's in. Yeah. And also says something about the role that the Phantom Thieves have within this, that they're not just like running into someone's brain who doesn't want it necessarily.
Totally, because at the end of the day, all of this is obviously a big corollary for mental health and things of that nature, and her dealing with this depression, obviously spurred by some other supernatural forces within the game compared to real life, but dealing with real depression as well mixed in there. I think, having that recognition that she can be more than that doesn't have to control her life, and that this outward help can be a benefit to her is really important for the progression of where things are going to go from here. But where things go from here, we'll have to find out in future weeks, because we are now officially beginning the infiltration for Futaba's palace. We'll have several weeks of free time. As we mentioned, August 19th is essentially our deadline before the Medjed deadline. So we've got a lot of time to work with, and we'll get to that in a little bit as a topic to discuss with all of you. But before we do, let's, as always, wrap up with some quizzes and questions.
Well, I was going to say real quick.
Yes.
looking forward,
Yes.
we do have, I think it's 3 solid weeks of free time.
Yeah.
And then it's another week of like mostly free time and then the deadline. So we're gonna, I think, keep our normal pattern of, I'm probably actually personally going to be doing this palace earlier rather than later within that free time, but I think we're going to keep the pattern of like the week before the deadline we're going to talk about the palace, so that if you don't want to immediately do the palace, you have 3 weeks of free time to figure it out and do it before the deadline. And then also just we're going to figure out, that's a lot of free time, so we're going to figure out what we'll try to keep it interesting, keep it fresh, talk about some other things, maybe dig into some storylines of specific characters as well in that time.
Yeah, there's definitely side stuff that we haven't been going into as much, like the confidant storylines, even some of the just like mini game-esque nature of things.
I did a special battle this week I didn't even mention.
Ooh, yeah, we could talk about that stuff as well. So if there's stuff that you specifically, that details that have happened so far that we haven't dug into as much that you want to dig into, definitely please comment on the YouTube version of the show about things you'd like to see us talk about in the next few weeks, or write into dornology@gmail.com. And we will definitely take that stuff into account, because we've got a lot of time to work with, and we don't just want to tell you about all of the people we hung out with, because that can get old a little fast if we're doing that for a month in a row. Before we do, though, let's jump into some last questions. I'll begin with our persona pseudonym before we get to Tom's pop quiz. This is, of course, where I test Tom's knowledge of all those personas and the silly names they're given before their real names are revealed.
I'm nervous about this one because we haven't been in palaces for so long.
Yeah, I had to dig back a little bit. This one is from Madarame's palace.
Okay.
And they are known as the Night Chimera.
Oh. Crap.
Correct. Crap is the name. No.
No, it's the lion. Is it Anzu?
It is not Anzu.
Oh, that's the other lion, I think.
It is Nue.
Nue.
Or Nua. I don't know how you would say it.
Oh,
correctly.
That's the like kind of like bigger guy.
It's more of like a tiger with like a monkey's face.
Yeah, I know that one. Yeah. Anzu is like more of like an actual chimera. So maybe that's where I got screwed up.
That's fair. Yeah. But I will keep their name a secret in case I use them in the future. But Tom, we also, of course, end every week with a pop quiz question from you. What have you got for us this week?
I have a very simple one. So this week, this is one I've been saving for a while. I've been waiting for the right moment to use it. And this week, we got to explore Yanganjaya. Admittedly, this character was not in Yanganjaya the day that you were exploring it, but this is a character normally in Yanganjaya that is one of my favorite characters in the entire game. A recurring character that you can talk to. So, my question is very simple this week. Who is Kotaro? That's the whole question.
Wow. All right.
And if you have to go and wander around Yanganjaya to find out, I encourage you to do so. But otherwise, that's the question. Who is Kotaro?
Extra points for how philosophical anyone gets about that. Because that
why is Kotaro?
Yeah, that can get really into why is Gamora territory. But we'll find out the answer to that question next week as we begin our Futaba's Palace chapter of Persona 5. And we'll have plenty to talk about in the weeks to come, both free time and otherwise. But in the meantime, thank you so much for listening or watching this episode. Remember that new episodes go live every Monday as we recount our adventures in Persona 5 Royal. If you're enjoying the show, please don't forget to leave a review or subscribe or give it a thumbs up or all the stars or whatever the platform of your choice gives you as a metric for letting us know you're enjoying the show. And if you want to write in with any larger questions or comments, you can write into dornology@gmail.com, and we'll read those in future weeks. But that's about going to do it for us on this week's episode of Take Your Time. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, nice to steal you.